In this explainer, we're using official data to break down exactly what it costs to settle in the United Kingdom as of 2026.
Over the last 20 years, UK visa fees versus inflation has changed significantly. But how much of that change was inflation and how much was real growth? Using official UK Home Office and ONS data, this analysis breaks down the numbers from 2006 to 2026, comparing immigration costs to wages, inflation, and housing. This is not commentary. This is structured economic measurement.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start by defining our scope so we're all on the same page. Then we'll look at the 20-year feed timeline. After that, we'll adjust for inflation, compare those costs to wages, walk through a real-world affordability scenario, and then wrap up with the key data-driven takeaways.
Okay, first things first. Before we can dive into the numbers, we need to be really precise about what we are, and just as importantly, what we are not measuring. So for this analysis, we are focusing only on the mandatory direct government fees. That means the core visa application fees themselves, the immigration health surcharge, or IHS, the indefinite leave to remain application, and the final naturalization fee. We're specifically excluding things like optional priority services, any legal fees you might pay, or smaller administrative costs like the Life in the UK test. This helps us keep a really clean, consistent baseline. Now here's a concept that's absolutely crucial for everything that follows: real terms cost. This isn't just the price on the sticker. It's the cost of something after we've factored in inflation. It tells us if something has genuinely become more expensive compared to everything else in the economy, or if its price is just, kept up with the times.
All right, with our definitions set, let's jump into the timeline. We're going to track how the nominal, that is, the face value, cost of settling in the UK has changed over the last 2 decades.
You can really see a few key moments on this timeline. If you go back to 2006, that's when the modern fee structure really began, with prices set just a bit above the actual cost to process applications. Then, by 2011, we saw the first really big jump in settlement fees. Fast forward to more recently, 2023 brought some pretty wide-ranging hikes of around 15 to 20%. And that was followed in early 2024 by that huge 66% increase to the immigration health surcharge.
So let's put a number on our starting point. Back in 2006, the fee for indefinite leave to remain, which is really the key step for settlement, was £350. Now, jump forward 20 years to today. That exact same application for indefinite leave to remain now costs £3,029. You can see right away the scale of that change is pretty dramatic.
And when you put those numbers side by side, it's stark. The ILR fee has seen a 765% increase in what we call nominal terms. The final step, naturalization for citizenship, has been on a very similar track, climbing over 700% from just $200 all the way up to $1,605. So, this brings us to the big question, right? We see these massive increases, but how much of that was just the cost of everything going up? In this next section, we're going to adjust these numbers to separate out general inflation from deliberate policy choices.
To do that, we need a benchmark. And for that, we're using the official figure from the Office for National Statistics. The headline inflation rate, which is called the Consumer Prices Index, or CPI, was at 3.0% for the year leading up to January 2026. So, that's the number we'll use to calculate the real terms cost.
This chart here really puts it all into perspective. The bar on the left, that's the actual fee today, £3,029. But now, look at the bar on the right. That shows what the 2006 fee of £350 would be today if it had only gone up with CPI inflation. It would be just £580. That huge gap between the two is what we're defining as the policy premium. It's a cost increase driven by policy, not just by inflation.
Okay, so we've established that these fees have risen way faster than inflation. But what does that actually mean for an individual's ability to pay? To figure that out, we need to compare these costs to average UK wages. So, according to the latest data from the ONS, the median gross annual salary for a full-time employee in the UK is £39,039. That figure represents the person right in the middle of the earnings scale, and it gives us a really solid baseline for measuring the real-world impact of these fees.
And here is where the difference becomes even more clear. We already saw that 765% growth in the ILR fee. Well, over that same 20-year period, median wages for full-time workers grew by roughly 63%. That means the cost of settlement has outpaced wage growth by more than 12 times.
Now, to put that into perspective, this chart shows what that means for a median earner today. The ILR application fee, by itself, not counting any other costs, now represents 7.8% of the UK's median gross annual salary. That is almost an entire month's pay before tax.
So let's pull all of this data together into one concrete example. We're going to model the total mandatory cost for a single person on a very common 5-year path to getting citizenship.
Okay, let's take someone on the skilled worker route. Their initial visa costs over £1,500. Then you've got the immigration health surcharge, which is paid upfront for 5 years at £5,175. Then comes the ILR application at £3,029. And finally, naturalization plus the ceremony fee is another £1,735. When you add it all up, the total mandatory cost comes to £11,458.
And just for full transparency, here are the assumptions for that model. This is for one person, a single applicant. They're on the skilled worker route, and we're only using standard processing times. This does not include the major additional costs you'd have for any dependents, and it also doesn't factor in things like legal fees.
So we've walked through all the data. What are the core, measurable conclusions we can draw from all of this? Let's quickly summarize the key takeaways. First, the cost to settle has shot up by over 765% since 2006, which massively outpaces general inflation. Second, because of that, a really big chunk of today's fees is that policy premium we talked about. Third, the total journey to citizenship for a single skilled worker now has a mandatory price tag of £11,458. And finally, the fourth point, which really puts a fine point on it, that total cost is now equivalent to 29% of an entire year's median gross salary in the UK. This has been Migration Cost Index, structured, data-driven analysis of migration costs in the United Kingdom. All figures are based on publicly available data and presented without commentary. For continued economic analysis, see the next video in this series.